is foreign policy, defense and security, so it will not be a surprise that my question will be within that particular issue area. The United States has just announced plans to deploy nuclear warheads in Japan. Ostensibly, this is part of the Indo-Pacific security umbrella, which is going to be established following the Quad, which is also working towards a collective security alliance. As a Senator of the Republic, what will be your position in regard to this matter?
The first candidate to answer this question is Ms. Attorney Balita.
Attorney Belen?
Attorney Agnes. Yes, it's really Mr. Balita.
All right, thank you for that question. You know, I trust that our participation and our collaboration with the democracies of the world will help us, and our mutual defense treaties and agreements with the multilateral relationship with other countries should be tapped towards that. As far as the collective security alliance is concerned, the Quad that you have mentioned, Madam, I would presume that the world is watching, and I am confident that we are not in the mood for war post-pandemic. And the most that we can do is to strengthen our positioning, our defense capability, and to cushion the impact on our basic requirements like fuel, food, and other related stuff. I would always be mindful that the democracies of the world in our alliances will be there to collaborate for a peaceful resolution of whatever conflict there are.
But would you have problems with having nuclear warheads in Japan, as U.S. has planned?
Well, certainly it's not for us to say, ma'am, but it's their decision. But I think the Quad itself, Japan being included in it, and the USA being included in it as well, would have better reasons for doing so. And our concern will always be our foreign policy, which should be inward-looking, and our foreign policy that will protect the interests of the Filipinos and the Philippines, not only in the Philippines, but also in Japan and in America, where, you know, conflicts may just arise resulting from it. I will trust that the world is not in the mood for war, and that we are a democracy of the world that would influence each other in seeking peaceful resolution of whatever conflicts there could be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Balita. And apologies for the mix-up earlier. I have two lists, and we're going from left to right out since Attorney Bailens gave the first opening statement. So we will move on. Same question to Mr. Castriciones.
Okay, so of course, as always, whenever we talk about nuclear warheads, it creates a lot of fear amongst our people. And whether we like it or not, of course, we can never persuade the Americans not to pursue such kind of plans, or military plans for that matter. But just the same, as part of the community of nations, we can actually choose where we have to side. And definitely, whether we would become neutral for as long as there would be threats from amongst these countries, the Philippines will always be a part of it. In fact, we all know that we can never isolate ourselves from the interaction of these countries, particularly the relationship between China and the United States of America. And for that matter, we have to take sides no matter what happens. We have to put a position that would have to place our country in a way that we will be able to protect ourselves.
Yes, but similarly with Dr. Balita, would you have any problems with having nuclear warheads in Japan?
Of course, yes, ma'am. Definitely, if there would be nuclear warheads in Japan, then basically this would create some sort of a countermeasure coming from the countries that would be opposed against such actions. And we all know, if we would recall, the Cuban crisis, wherein the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics have actually placed the so-called missiles in Cuba, and definitely there was a reaction coming from the United States. And what will stop China from doing the same? And probably if this will escalate, it will create a war. And that is definitely a no-no for us.
Thank you.
Attorney Panelo.
Ma'am, as a senator, I will raise my voice of concern and apprehension. I'm against the deployment of nuclear warheads. We know for a fact that if you use that, it will be the end of the world. I do not think that any country would agree to the use of nuclear warheads. We have to use international diplomacy on whatever problems we have. We cannot be threatening people or countries with deployment of warheads. That is precisely why we have international diplomacy. We have to use negotiation table to solve whatever differences we have between countries.
Thank you.
We'll follow up. Okay. Thank you, Attorney Panelo. Ms. Legarda.
Having been the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, Professor Carlos, and our dear audience, I would always take into consideration the dimensions of foreign policy, namely economic, political, the welfare of overseas Filipinos, not just in Japan, but in all areas who will be affected by the deployment of these warheads, as well as perhaps cultural diplomacy. And every stretch of that must be exhausted. As a student and administrator of national security, I would also take into consideration the 5 dimensions of national security, which would include socio-economic, political, even religious, and ecological dimension. All of these have to be discussed, not just by one senator, but a 24-man and woman Senate and the whole Congress, so that the Chief Executive could be advised accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Attorney Roque.
As a professor of international law, I submit that nuclear weapons are illegal. 1, because they are incapable of distinction under the law of international humanitarian law. And number 2, they cause serious, superfluous injury and unnecessary suffering. I am therefore against putting nuclear warheads in Japan. Secondly, it could run contrary not only to our constitution, which prescribes that the Philippines shall be a nuclear-free zone, it also runs contrary against an ASEAN treaty declaring the whole of ASEAN as nuclear-free. Number 3, in terms of foreign policy, I believe that there should be strict adherence with the UN Charter. There should be strict adherence with Article 2.4 of that Charter, which prohibits the use of force, and the mere possession of nuclear weapons could constitute the of use of force, which is equally prohibited under the UN Charter, in the same way that actual use of force is prohibited. I enjoin all countries to comply with Article 2.3 of the UN Charter, which encourages everyone to resolve disputes peacefully.
But Harry, if this comes as part of the package of the Quad, what will your stand be?
As of now, we're not part of Quad, and I'm glad we're not. Because if we become part of Quad, we would inevitably be involved in an arms race and might be involved in a conflict that will not have anything to do with our national interest. Our national interest is to achieve prosperity, to be friends with our neighbors in particular. We have no fight with any country, and we have no wish to be dragged into any armed conflict.
But since your mutual defense treaty has not been abrogated and is still in force, we continue to be a defense ally of the U.S. So
we are, but for all intents and purposes, that's a dead treaty. Because when China took away 2 of our islands, the United States did not come to our assistance. That's a dead treaty.
thank you.
Mr. Marcoleta.
The warheads, Madam, are a source of fear and concern for all humanity. That is why, as an elected senator, I will air my concern and probably advise the administration that we should be advised and by the state policy that our country has to pursue an independent foreign policy, and it also talks about our relationship with other states, that the primordial consideration are national sovereignty, territorial integrity, our national interest, and the right to self-determination. And guided by that, Madam, I'd like to advise the administration that we have a UN Charter to uphold, that these warheads are really prohibited under the law, under the Charter, and therefore we should abide by the Charter, and we should take the diplomatic course in every issue that confronts the world and in our country. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, no follow-up question from Professor Carlos. Thank you, Attorney Marcoleta. Attorney Gadon.
I do not agree, or I do not agree to the idea that the U.S. should deploy warheads in Japan, because it will only escalate the tension between China and the U.S. And since we will be caught in the middle of the whatever tension or hostilities that may arise in the future. So I am not in favor of it. And if we should learn our lesson from the Ukraine, the U.S. has been posturing for the defense of Ukraine, and they did not. Russia invaded it. And when you talk about the 1952 treaty, the defense treaty, as Secretary Roque pointed out, hindi na yun applicable.
So that means if you are a senator, you will abrogate the Mutual Defense Treaty.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. And even I will even urge the government not to enter into this Quad arrangement.
But will neutrality fly?
Well, yes, I would rather adopt the neutrality stand.
Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Gadon. Attorney Olarte.
Well, I think there are already nuclear warheads in Japan. This is the defense policy of the United States. But for the Philippines, our Constitution does not allow us to have nuclear arms or nuclear warheads in our possession. So my view is that the nuclear warheads have provided a security ambit to Japan, and I think the United States believes that the best security is to have a good defense. In the part of the present war between Russia and Ukraine, Ukraine was very neutral, was a peaceful country. The invasion was unprovoked. And yet Russia has put into activation its nuclear forces. I believe that we should settle disputes peacefully.
Attorney Olarte, sorry.
Thank you.
We're out of time. Mr. Albani.
In the name of God, the most compassionate and the most merciful. I think we have been in war since memorial. From the First World War and Second World War, nakikita natin that nobody wins in wars. So, para sa akin, we have to define our baseline. We have to be in the position to negotiate in favor of our sovereignty. Consistent must be based in history, culture, tradition, and it is not based with the Western colonialism. So I disagree, and at the same time, we will not support on that nuclear war. We have to be in a neutral position because kawawa ang sambayan ng Pilipino. Tulad ng sinabi ko, we have been in war since memorial. Nobody win in war.
Attorney Espiritu.
Yes, not only do I disagree, we must in fact protest. The United States is playing a dangerous game in our region. First, it is already worse that the U.S. pursues a policy of containment against China. And when you do that, history has proven us when a superpower contained, just like in World War II, how Germany felt constricted by the Western powers, it resulted in World War II. And now we are witnessing the same policy of containment in Russia, and now we have war. Now, it's not only that the United States contains China, the United States is trying to escalate by putting nuclear warheads in Japan. Definitely, that's a very, very dangerous game. It will lead to war. We must, in fact, protest against this act.
So does that mean you are also going to abrogate the Mutual Defense Treaty?
Yes, I do, but I would like to add that I disagree with the statement a while ago that we have to pick sides. That means if you don't pick the United States, then we'll pick China. I totally disagree with that. We don't pick the US, we don't pick China. We must have an independent foreign policy. And in fact, we must talk to our neighbors and have a non-aligned formation in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, but is sitting on the fence a viable foreign policy?
That's actually
to sit on the fence?
That's actually not sitting on the fence. That is charting our own independent foreign policy.
Well, you said you don't want to take sides, so you're sitting on the fence.
No, that's not sitting on the fence, ma'am. That is, in fact, making a choice that our future as a nation, our interest as a nation should not be tied to the interest of these two superpowers, and we have no choice. We'll just have to choose sides. That's not sitting on a fence. That is choosing our side, the side of the Filipino people, our national interest.
Thank you.
Karen, please.
Okay. Attorney Suplico.
Follow up on the questions of Professor Carlos addressed to Attorney Roque and Attorney Gadon. Okay, their positions were, which they stated, that the Mutual Defense Treaty is a dead letter law. If elected in the Senate, what would you do? Would you do some saber rattling in the Senate? Would you file a resolution to drive the last nail into the coffin of the Mutual Defense Treaty?
Unfortunately, Attorney Suplico, the latest decision of the Supreme Court in this regard says that the power to terminate a treaty is an executive function. It is not a decision to be made by the Senate. That is the recent decision, Pangilinan versus Executive Secretary. Having said that, we can still pass legislation if we want, declaring the country again as nuclear-free zone and providing for punishment in case it is violated.
Attorney Gadon.
If we can effectively remove the U.S. bases here, the military bases, so why can't we remove the 1952 Defense Treaty? It has been proven that the U.S. will not come to our aid when hostilities would break out. Look what's happening in our proxy war with China. The U.S. is just using us at home. So we might as well abrogate the treaty.
Yeah, but you have not driven away the Americans. They are in 5 military bases under the EDCA. So they're here. And because we agreed to the EDCA, isn't it?
But those are just executive agreements, Madam.
No, I'm questioning because you said earlier that, we don't allow foreign forces here. They are here, and they are here because we agreed to them being here in 5 military bases in the EDCA, under the EDCA.
Yes, but those are temporary stays only, Madam. If you will recall my answer, we have removed the U.S. military installations and bases here. Not necessarily the joining of exercises by the U.S. soldiers. That is a different matter. And in fact, we can also abrogate the EDCA because that is just an executive agreement.
So now that there are no follow-up questions, we'll move on back to the original question of Professor Carlos. And last but not the least, we have Attorney Bailen.
I view with grave concern the deployment of nuclear warheads in Japan. First and foremost, there's a saying in international relations that there is no permanent friends nor permanent enemies in international law. And during World War II, we know how the United States tried to impose sanctions, economic sanctions, when it knew that Japan was trying to assert its military powers, and that's why it tried to contain. There was an embargo, and when Japan was pushed to the wall, it has no other way to go but to declare war. They were trying really to reach the president at that time, but they were really pushed to the wall. That's why I'm very, very concerned, because we are supposed to be the allies. And then all of a sudden, they will put the nuclear warheads there. But of course, can they put it in the Philippines? No, because our constitution prohibits it. So essentially, there's going to be a twist of the balance of power here if it's going to be deployed here.
Any follow-up, Professor Carlos?
Yeah, well, it's a follow-up, but it's not a follow-up, because I want to ask Agnes if, since you don't want Japan to be the anchor of the Quad, are you relying on the ASEAN political security community being realized sometime, like, they have targeted 2025, actually?
The ASEAN 10 now is really, from consensual organization. It's really developing in a positive way. Because it's supposed to be, it's just a consensus, but right now it's really playing a very, very major role right now in this particular region. So, and besides, ASEAN it didn't really
Apologies, Attorney, by then you're out of time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, just one more follow-up there, Agnes, no? But we committed already to the ASEAN political security community. For 2025 is the target date. We committed to that. So it's not anything that, you set aside, because it's part of the troika of the community, the three communities: economic, political security, and social culture. What I'm saying is, because you are rejecting Japan as the anchor country of the Quad, because it's really the anchor country of the Quad, then that means you must have a fallback.
Yeah, if I remember, ma'am, ASEAN also entered relations. Also, we invited China when ASEAN was starting to flex its muscle. The United States, Australia, they were invited. So I think there is a need to review really why is a need to deploy nuclear warheads in Japan at this particular time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Biden. Thank you, Professor Carlos, and congratulations to our candidates for surviving Professor Carlos in the first round.